February 23, 1945, Mount Suribachi, a concrete bunker, a trembling hand, and a diary entry that would have been treason if found by Japanese officers. In that cramped dark, a private first class recorded what every hardened soldier in the Imperial Army could scarcely accept. The Marines are not what our propaganda promised they would be. They do not break. They do not surrender. They continue, even after grenades strip flesh and bone, even after machine gun fire chews through ranks, even after the most humane instinct, to live, should have reclaimed them. What the Japanese defenders met across island after island in the Pacific was not merely another uniformed enemy. It was a force that fused an uncanny willingness to pay the cost of victory with an industrial scale of support that made sacrifice into strategy. Where doctrine had expected collapse, the Americans offered relentless motion, and where belief in bushido had taught the Japanese that death before dishonor would be the equalizer, reality exposed a more terrible equation. Spirit plus material equals inevitability. From Guadalcanal to Iwo Jima, the pattern repeats like a dirge. In August 1942, Japanese officers who had won campaigns against Chinese formations anticipated easy victories over green American forces. They were wrong in the most elemental way. Night, previously a cloak for Japanese attack, became a different battlefield entirely. Marines learned to use darkness as a weapon. Small raiding units slipped through jungle the Japanese had deemed impassable, assaulted with automatic weapons from point-blank range, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. Diaries recovered from officers who fell record-stunned confusion. Units that had never withdrawn, and soldiers who fought hand-to-hand at bayonet range until nothing more was left could not be squared with pre-war assumptions about American softness. Annihilation on the beaches of Tarawa and the volcanic black sands of Iwo Jima was measured not just in bodies, but in shattered expectations. The defenders documented how Marine squads accepted casualty rates other armies would find unconscionable, then kept moving. They watched flamethrower teams continue the assault after the crew had been cut down. They watched demolition men crawl into bunkers to place explosives, knowing they would likely die doing it, and still others would replace them and finish the job. This was not madness. It was doctrine married to logistics. Japanese intelligence reports, once they were read without the filters of imperial hubris, distilled an ugly clarity. Marines fight as an integrated machine. Riflemen fix targets while machine gunners suppress. Mortars throw smoke, artillery prepares the ground. Tanks and flamethrowers burn the sanctuaries. And aircraft and naval gunfire erase resistance that might have been tenable a week earlier in history's older wars. What terrified the defenders was not simply the weapons themselves, but the infrastructure that made them renewable. When a company was gutted on Peleliu or Saipan, replacements flowed in with astonishing speed. Wounded were evacuated, patched, and returned. Supplies arrived with a train-like regularity that drained Japanese hope. One captured lieutenant wrote of finding Marines a few days after the landing eating hot food, with trucks delivering ammunition and medical tents treating casualties. The picture that emerged to those who survived was devastating. Japan could kill forever. America could replace forever. At a tactical level, the Marines inverted assumptions that had once been Japanese strengths. Banzai charges, conceived to break the enemy through overwhelming ferocity, became self-defeating against automatic weapons and interlocking fields of fire. Night assaults that had succeeded against retreating forces crashed into prepared positions manned by soldiers who simply refused to stop. The difference lay in training and culture reshaped by the industrial age. Japanese soldiers were taught bushido, valor, and sacrifice. American recruits were brutalized and rebuilt in training camps designed to remove the civilian, to make brotherhood and mission replace self. The result was a fighting ethos that accepted acceptable casualties as a calculable cost of taking ground. Japanese planners, schooled in their own logic that valued the individual as part of a collective honor, found this calculus obscene and lethal. A commander who calculated that 10,000 casualties would halt in advance watched the Marines take his beaches after suffering that very price in the first week. The mathematics of war had become one-sided. Japan could not outproduce, outsupply, or out-evacuate the attrition America could absorb, and yet the human pictures remain raw and intimate. Diaries and interrogation reports preserve moments that statistics cannot. A grenade-blasted Marine who continued firing with broken limbs until he could no longer hold the weapon. A flamethrower operator replaced twice over as his team fell. platoons that surged across open ground under devastating fire to clear bunkers in minutes where doctrine would have demanded artillery preparation. These individual acts aggregated into a strategic advantage. For Japanese soldiers who had once believed in the invincibility of their own spirit, the revelation was corrosive. Corpses and captured letters told a new story. The enemy matched their devotion and added ships, planes, steel, and supply chains to the bargain. The effect on morale was catastrophic. Men who had been told American troops were weak and individualistic discovered instead fighters who would not stop, who would rout and then counterattack in darkness, who moved like a machine, because junior leaders were empowered to act and exploit opportunities immediately. Where Japanese officers issued commands, American NCOs adapted and struck. The calculus extended beyond battlefield tactics to the broader strategic picture. Japan's finite resources, stretched over thousands of miles of island outposts, could not sustain a defense against an adversary whose industrial base guaranteed replacements and materiel. Suribachi's grim acceptance at Iwo Jima that his mission was to make the Americans pay enough blood to force negotiation encapsulates the arithmetic of defeat. The defenders' bravery did not equalize the contest. It only raised the cost which America could pay. And as the campaigns unfolded, reports accumulated that reshaped Japanese doctrine into an acceptance of attrition as strategy. Hold long enough to inflict maximum casualties, buy time, hope for negotiation. That hope died with the mushroom clouds in August 1945, but the lessons remained permanent and bitter. Post-war testimony only confirmed what the survivors had seen. Marines were feared not because they were mythical warriors, but because they represented the synthesis of human grit and national capacity. They matched Bushido's resolve with an American system that ensured a river of supplies, medical care, tactical flexibility, and immediate firepower. Japanese veterans later acknowledged that their belief in spirit alone had been a tragic delusion. The Marines proved that spirit without resources was not enough. The lasting image is not one of triumphalism, but of tragedy on both sides. Men who fought with extraordinary courage, and nations whose futures were extinguished not for lack of will, but for lack of the means to sustain it. This is the story that must be told with the same seriousness the participants lived it. Not as a celebration of slaughter, but as a clear-eyed accounting of how modern war decides between nations. The Marines did what they were raised, trained, and equipped to do. The Japanese defenders demonstrated the nobility and futility of a valor unbacked by industry. That duel between spirit and supply defines the Pacific campaigns and leaves a lesson as stark as any battlefield diary. Courage can only be decisive when it is matched by the means to keep fighting. What do you think? Did the balance of spirit and material always decide modern wars? Or can strategy still overturn overwhelming industrial advantage? If this deep dive into the Pacific moved you, leave your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you want more long-form historical narratives. Subscribe for weekly documentary-style scripts. And ring the bell so you never miss a story that digs beneath the headlines.